Now we got the,
So that door does lock still?
It sticks.
but we have a pathway.
It's, people couldn't get in the last session.
We just put a chair in the door?
I just
Yeah,
blocked
yeah.
it so that the one side doesn't close all the way.
Okay. Wouldn't want people to be refused.
Plus it makes a lot of noise too.
You don't mind the noise.
The thing from.
I was assigned between this one or.
Okay, well, welcome to the next session, everyone. I'm gonna introduce Mike from the California Mountain Bike Association. Coalition.
Yeah, that's all right.
Biking.
I get one right today yet. Oh, no, I won't. I'll have to wait for one. Okay, this is about an hour. I'll pass it off to you guys.
Great, thanks so much. Hi everyone, Michael Anzalone, again with the California Mountain Biking Coalition. I'm joined today by Steve Messer, who is a CAMTB board member and also the president of Corba out of Los Angeles County, a mountain bike and trail stewardship organization. Also here with Vernon Huffman, the vice president of California Mountain Biking Coalition and the executive director of Access for Bikes, another trail stewardship organization, member board of California Mountain Biking Coalition. So a couple things I want to do. Today's session was really intended to be, we wanted to share a bit of the California mountain biking story. We want to take you on a journey, share some of the experiences, candid experiences, and that's why I've asked Steve and Vernon to be here, just to talk about the experience of launching and developing a shared platform for trail advocacy. This organization officially got its launch in 2020, and so we've been up and running now for about 2 years, and now it's just a great time. We're doing our own internal reflections on that experience and on that journey, what we've learned along the way. And so we thought we'd bring some of that here for anybody that's interested in perhaps even embarking on their own coalition, or anyone that's in a coalition, and maybe there are some nuggets here that you can apply to your approach as well. So a couple things we want to that we're going to cover today. Talk a little bit about the organizational development. This is actually very fitting, I think, on the heels of this last session. We actually heard from the Redwood Trails Alliance and their recent journey, their merger of two organizations and launch, and that's like an example of something happening at the local level. California Mountain Biking Coalition, as the name suggests, is sitting at a state level, and we're a collective of a bunch of those organizations like Corba, like Access for Bikes, like the Redwood Trails Alliance, that have elected to work together on and to make some shared progress and some shared efforts related to trail and trail advocacy. So before we get into Steve and Vernon's story here, I want to just share some of the facts and figures, give you some of the little snapshot of where we are today. Again, launched officially in January of 2020. That's when we received our official notice from the Fed, and we are an organization of organizations. So we currently represent 30 trail advocacy, trail stewardship organizations that are working on bike-friendly trails in and around California. We have our organizations combined are active in 18 of the 21 state parks districts. They are collectively stewarding 2,500 miles plus of trails in there across California. We also are, in addition to working with trail stewardship organizations, we've also engaged NorCal and SoCal NICA leagues. So we're engaging the youth and the youth organization, the next generation of advocates. That's an important component. That represents 3,500 riders. Lauren, you know those stats, approximately 3,500. We are, I think I got a little behind on some of the stats here, but combine these organizations, this is where this coalition starts getting, from my perspective, really interesting. Combined, they have 15,000 paid members, and so active folks that are engaged in their organizations, engaged in trail stewardship, but a combined audience of almost 145,000 people. That is, from our perspective, like a point of leverage for us, a means and a way for us to get the attention of key land managers, of legislators, of policymakers here in the state, and use that as a way to actively influence what's happening in and around the state related to trail advocacy. To give you a little sense of some of the organizations that are involved here, you might recognize some of the logos up here, and also a spread. We're really, in terms of presence, we've got great presence along the coast, and as you're moving inland through on the corridor up to Sacramento, we're starting to really fill out the Sierras. Across each of those corridors that are running across the Sierras, we're making our way through there. But at the same time, like there's a lot of space out there. We've identified actually 90 organizations in and around the state that are doing similar work to Corvette, to Access for Bikes, and part of our work going forward will be bringing in new organizations into this coalition, and filling in the gaps in terms of our work here. Let's see, and talk a little bit about some of the work, like why we got this organization together and what we're currently up to. It's really in part to be a unified, our mission is to be a unified voice for the mountain biking community. And that term is morphing a bit. It includes anyone who's really riding bikes on natural surface trails. So gravel bikes and mountain bikes and everything in between. We're here to engage land managers like California State Parks, like the U.S. Forest Service, CAL FIRE, and even helping our local organizations build productive and fruitful relationships, and coming to the table as a true partner, not as an antagonist necessarily. We want to come and build and add to, contribute to the efforts that are ongoing in the state, and be thought of in that light as well. We're also working in part to track and influence legislation. That was one of the expressed needs that in our conversations with the member community, the organizations who got involved early on, it's one of the things that many of them struggle with. It's tough to be a local trail advocacy organization working and keeping your focus on what's going on in your own backyard, and at the same time trying to apply influence and trying to engage at the state level with the different legislation and such that's being put forward. We as a coalition can share that load. We can pick up the efforts. We can identify, activate people within the coalition itself to focus in on that. The ones that are most keen on it, most interested in doing it, and then use that small subgroup or working group to help them share that information out across the member community, form position statements, and with that, with the alignment, go back and lean in and generate support or opposition for pieces of legislation that are tied to public lands, that are tied to conservation, that are tied to recreation. And finally, we are here to amplify the work of our member organizations. That was something as well that I've heard expressed in some of the sessions here with the Recreate Responsibly. Like this is my favorite part about my job is working with organizations like Access for Bikes, like Corba, like SF Urban Riders, like SDMBA, like Fat Track. We got some people here. They're an amazing group of people, an amazing group of leaders, and this coalition is a platform for those leaders to come together. I'm sorry, and for share. I didn't want to miss everybody here. But amazing opportunity and platform for these leaders to come together, and we have the benefit and joy of actually sharing that information out and communicating that out to the world, to the larger mountain biking community, but also to just outdoor recreation in general, to the general public, to let the general public know that they're an amazing group of people that are out there on the weekends and in their free time volunteering to get this work done, and we should be supporting their efforts. So with that, I want to jump into the fireside chat piece of this. As I said, I asked Steve and Vernon to step in here to share some of the just color and story around how this organization came to be. We call this program Seed to Growth to Impact, and we're going to take you through some of the phases of these last 2.5 years of the organization's evolution, and then close with some thoughts on what's in terms of the impact component of it, what we're potentially on the cusp of, and how the members of our organization see advocacy and trail advocacy evolving into the future. So we'll take you on that journey. We're gonna have some time at the end for questions, and but if something comes up along the way, if you guys want, just jump in here. It's a small group, and we can keep it interactive and fun. So to start, to introduce Steve and Vernon, instead of reading their bio or asking them to give us their history exactly, I had actually a specific question for each of them to open with, and it was first your origin story. Like, how did you come to find yourself in outdoor advocacy? Like, when did you cross over from being a mountain biker to an advocate? And can you share with the audience here a little bit about that story?
All right.
You wanna start, Steve?
Sure. My name's Steve Messer, President of Conservative Off-Road Bicyclists Association in Los Angeles, and I was also a member of a club called Over the Bars Mountain Bike Club, which rode every Tuesday and Thursday night and also on weekends. But all through the 1990s, I was working as a raft guide, so my weekends I was up at the river. I was up at the Cone River or the Kaweah or any of the rivers in California. So anyway, in about 2003 or so, 2004-ish, my memory's not entirely there as the specific dates, but I knew that our club president was also on the board of Corba, and he did trail work. And I had never done trail work, but I knew there was a problem on this one particular trail. I'd ridden by and seen this big rock slide that needed to be repaired. So I sent him an email and asked him to do it. His name was Hans. And Hans wrote me back and said, okay, when are you going to come out with me and fix it? So that was the short end of it. He got me out there to work on the trail, and I started really enjoying it and appreciating what went into keeping the trail open. So I then became a regular trail work volunteer. I attended an IMBA Trail Care Crew conference and learned a lot more. And then I started wondering about new trails and how do you get new trails? And that's when the light switched on, and I realized, okay, there's more to this than just expecting a trail to be there. If you want new trails, you've got to get involved. So I started getting involved in some trail planning processes, and within a year I was also invited to be on the Corba board. So from there it just blossomed, and I've been involved since then.
Like a waterfall effect.
Yeah.
Great.
But it came down to knowing somebody who was already doing it, and then pressuring me to be a part of it and to contribute.
Vernon?
Yeah, so in the late 80s, early 90s, I was a seasonal park ranger with the National Park Service the last few years in LEO. And 9 months a year appointment, and I came back to Marin in '92 to kill a winter, and had already discovered the mountain bike in college. So I didn't really know Marin in terms of riding. So I started riding Mount Tamalpais, because that was the landmark. You see Mount Tam from all over the Bay Area, 2,500 feet, it kind of is the challenge. So kind of built up to it. I couldn't even ride it the whole thing at once, and then got better and better, and then I could ride Tam. But one thing that stood out to me was there was no bike signs at every single trail. And outdoorsy guy like me, I kind of take a peek at these trails, and I was like, geez, these look really nice, really fun. So that was just kind of not clear. So I looked up my advocacy organization at the time. It was the Bicycle Trails Council, and I went to a meeting and started kind of getting the lay of the land, but I quickly got channeled into trail work. And I was lucky enough to join the original team that built Tamarancho, a purpose-built bike course, 10-mile cross-country trail on Boy Scouts of America. But through that work, it took 6 years to build that seasonally. We work in the winter only when soil's workable. But in that time, it was really my education, hanging out with the people that were familiar with the issues, and even meeting some of land managers and you know, a fellow like Alan Goldman, who worked for the Water District and is now passed and has a trail name for him. That was kind of where I learned that I had to, and being a fairly type A person that I am, I knew that was kind of where I needed to go, and I started attending the board meetings and learning the importance of partnerships with the agencies, and really stewardship and volunteering, and learning basically that was how the best way, you know, that was gonna somehow someday create change. And then became executive director, or became president of Access for Bikes, and then we later carved a new title for me and some compensation with turning my job into the executive director. And then we'll tell you more of the story of CAMTB, but CAMTB basically saved me and got my head out of Marin. Marin is a glacial place to be an advocate. We are making progress, happy to say. It's getting better, but still glacial. So getting my head out of Marin and onto something new and creative and exciting, super healthy for the mind.
And what, I guess for both of you, this is like really kind of more getting at that personal story, like what kept you in it?
For me, what kept me in it was the trail work, and actually seeing the physical difference you could make in the trail, and making it more fun, more accessible, more enjoyable for everyone.
Right.
And once you see that immediate feedback, it's kind of feels good. It makes you want to get out and do more.
Yeah. How about you?
I know what kept me in it. 11 years ago, I went to my first high school mountain bike race.
Okay.
It was at the Stafford Lake, back when there was a race there, a high school race there.
Yeah.
And but it was before my wife started a high school team and we became coaches, but seeing kids on bikes, and just, I could see the excitement in them that I felt on the mountain, on trails, when I was starting out, seeing their siblings riding around the camp and the race era venue on bikes, but seeing their parents also now, you know, joining the kids and getting out on bikes. And there's always that open track time when the parents can go out and ride the course too. I caught on to that. I was only there for a day, but that whole experience, transition, it gave me a new goal.
Yeah.
And I realized that I thought I was doing it for me, but again, that glacial pace was not very rewarding, you know, fueling. So the kids really put it back, refueled my tank to keep going.
Right. And I think, you know, with the leaders that we're working with in California Mountain Biking Coalition, I hear these stories often. Like it is an impassioned bunch, and it's I think what I see a lot is the community that these leaders and their organizations and their membership are part of is really what's sort of fueling this passion and desire, this commitment to continue showing up and to putting in the long hours. It's often not with, you know, uncompensated, just doing it because it's an imperative. Well, let's shift gears into the beginning of the organization. Both of you were there at the inception, as well as a number of the folks that were in the room here. Vernon, can you share with the group here a little bit about how the idea for CAMTB came to be? What spurred it?
Yeah, so let's go back to 2008? 2018. Like you said, these years.
They all meld into each other.
2018.
1829.
Yes, not that long ago. 4 years ago. We were at the California Greenways conference in Rohnert Park, and there was, there was no CAMTB. There was just our individual organizations, but what was discovered was somebody's light bulb, or more than one light bulb, went off during this 3-day event, and we started talking amongst ourselves, and because we were looking around and we were noting that this has really become a gathering of place for mountain biking. That the mountain bikers were engaged in their trail communities, and they're engaged in, you know, wanting more and learning the process to get more. And this is one of those venues where you learn how to navigate processes, navigate policy, navigate state law.
I heard
CEQA.
Deb call that out
Yeah.
in her talk on the last one, like, you gotta learn the system.
Yeah, this is where we come to,
Yeah.
you know, help learn the, you know, part of our education to learn the system.
Yeah.
So this kind of this realization that this was now seemed to be the gathering point of a lot of like-minded people. And so we put the call out to, I don't know how we did it, I don't remember, we just started spreading the word, I believe.
Yeah.
And we said, Thursday, 4 p.m., Bear Republic Brewing Company. Happened to be just over across the fence. I mean, it was just perfectly located, you know, at the bit.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
That's
That's
it.
the crew.
So this is part of the crew. I mean, when we were out in our happy hour before we took a picture, I think there was around 60 of us who had gathered. And we, you know, everybody just kind of casually got together. And then at one point, we got in a circle. And we circled up. And we kind of just went around and said, where are we at? What are we doing? And there was this common thread amongst us that we had a shared concern that our IMBA representative for California recently lost her job, and we were feeling like, who's gonna do that now for us? Because we were fed a lot of the content from Sacramento, and a lot of the kind of the umbrella work that, you know, it's harder to do on your own as a single entity. And so we shared that concern, and we were like, okay, well, now what? And that's where the idea was seeded, and we said, well, we need a new organization. And you know, we didn't have a name yet. We didn't have anything but that picture right there that we all took home. We shared
And a
it.
list of email addresses.
Yeah.
Basically, that's all we had. That's
We
what we
did.
had out of it.
Passed the paper, wrote the emails.
Yeah.
We got on an email list, and over the following year, that group basically became five, maybe six leaders from across the state that just established themselves as, we are going to do this. And we started. Why don't you take it from there? 'Cause
we started networking and meeting, doing just email threads at first, but it was really 2019 at the Trails and Greenways conference in San Diego where we formalized it. We had the similar setup where we invited people to come have a happy hour discussion, and at that meeting we said, I don't know who it was that said it, but who wants to be on a steering committee? And I guess the six of us, including Kevin Loomis at the time from San Diego, stepped up and said, okay, we'll do it. So shortly after that Trails and Greenways conference in 2019, we realized that email was not going to work. Just trying to gather information from 20 to 30 different individuals through an email thread wasn't working. So I don't know whose idea it was to use Slack, but we adopted Slack as our platform, and that really...
It was Jake's idea.
It was Jake, yeah. So that really gave us a forum in which we could communicate, and it has been really a wonderful platform for us to do that communication, because it's so much more efficient than email. You can thread conversations around topics, and what we did is, once we got Slack going, we said, okay, let's have a naming channel. So we had a whole discussion about what we should call ourselves, and there was a lot of debate back and forth whether we call ourselves a Trails Foundation or a mountain biking organization, and we ended up with the California Mountain Biking Coalition. And using Slack, then we had to come up with a mission statement, and we set up a mission statement channel, and people started throwing out ideas, and a lot of discussion happened around it, and we really put some thought into the mission statement, in that we realized that we'd lost our voice in Sacramento from having Laurel Harkness lose her job with INBA.
I saw her here today.
Yeah, she's here.
She's here.
And and we'd become used to having her send us information that was relevant to statewide, and we were not getting that anymore, and we didn't have a source for it. So we needed to have a voice in Sacramento. But at the same time, we also realized that we have a bunch of organizations who already have established relationships with their local land manager that we didn't want to jeopardize. So we didn't want to come in and be a top-down type of organization. We realized that from the start as well. We didn't want to be dictating what the organizations around the state would be doing or their policy. We wanted to amplify their voices in Sacramento. So there was a lot of thought that went into our mission statement.
We also talked too about the intention around being an organization of organizations. I think that was something that really has set the direction for what the work that this group of folks are doing.
It really did, because we realized that we have individual members in all of our member organizations. CORB is a membership organization, and most of our member organizations have their own individual members. And we didn't want to compete with compete for members. And it was around that time that IMBA also changed its model from being a membership model to not being a membership model. So it helped us decide then that we would invite the organizations to be members, and we would be a coalition, not a association, and a coalition of existing organizations. So having this coalition and having all these existing organizations, being able to draw from them our platform and our policies and represent them, not dictate to them what we think they should be doing and having as their missions. So that really sums up how we got there.
Well, I think that's is there anything else, Vernon, that you would add just in those, 2019, 2020 that you would maybe draw on, or was there any sort of formative decisions that were made that really sort of set the tone for your organization? We talked about SLAG, how about the advisory council itself? I think that was another, important decision and a seed for what this organization could become.
Well, yeah, I mean, Steve touched on it. We didn't want to be a board of directors that dictated what policy would be and just broadcast it to the membership and say, here it is. But we talked a lot about this, and we talked about lessons learned from other organizations that we saw that weren't quite set up that way, and we wanted to learn lessons from. So we decided that all of our member organizations would have the ability to put 2 people on an advisory council or committee council. And they would, and then we would meet quarterly with that council and really develop our content. Right. So we do meet quarterly. Some of those individuals are here, and we talk on Slack ahead of time during the year about some content, whatever is active at the time. But we expect those people to come and develop what our policies, procedures, etc. are, so that we are a ground-up organization. We're not a top-down. We want to be an organization. CAMTB from the start was envisioned as an advocacy tool to help the organizations and really a clearinghouse of information. And I've always pictured, we haven't quite got there yet, but I've always pictured having the handbook of advocacy. Like take all these organizations and take the bits and parts and actually write a document that you could use as secrets of success. So there's 2 people from every organization, so now we're growing, and those meetings should grow, and more ideas should come from that. Yeah. And it's pretty cool. I will add to Steve, though, one of those early items, because we're brave and we're not afraid to talk about things, one of those early Slack channels was e-bikes. Yeah. We wanted to get in front of it and just get something out there, get a policy going. And if you're interested, in short, I can sum it up really easily. We just said Class 1 e-bikes have a place on natural surface trails where the land manager has a conversation with the local bike community. And provided there's a conversation going, we are okay with that use. We just don't think that one bit should happen in silos, you know. Obviously, it needs to be environmentally appropriate, because we're stewards first, so.
But the way we got to that was by utilising the advisory council. We threw up some initial, here are some ideas we have. Let's hear what the council has to say. So we took it to the council, and after a lot of back and forth, we got to a point where we had a policy that everyone could agree with and live with.
Yeah, and I think that was also a real learning point for the organization, just to go through that process, because
Yes.
I think it is something that I'm observing that as a community we're getting better at. If we're not hearing input from people, like, getting better at sort of engaging, and it's also one thing I would say as the organization grows, it's also a challenge. Like it's much easier to do when we're a 5 organization coalition, or 15 organization, and I lost that. That's all right. Well, let's shift gears into. So we talked about the seed stage of CAMTB and some of the things that were planted. Let's talk a bit about this growth, and for that, I'll bring us up into this past year, 2021. How did the coalition's efforts evolve in that second and a half year? And maybe Steve, I'll start with you on that front. You want to talk a little bit about maybe some of our land manager engagement?
Yeah, so one thing we did, because we want to be representative of all the member organisations, is we brought in a consultant who did interviews with every one of our member organisations who had a relationship with state parks, and state parks was the first land manager we decided to engage with. And what came out of those interviews and discussions was a listing of the issues that people were having with state parks, as far as getting access to do trail work, access to trails themselves for a change in use process. And it became clear, and this wasn't until we had a 30-member coalition that we could poll this from, how inconsistently the state park units were managed around the state. Whereas one organisation up in the Central Coast area could have a wonderful relationship with their state park and be out there building new trail and doing projects on the ground and getting engagement with their equestrian counterparts and hiking and running counterparts as well. And whereas in other areas of the state we don't have any such success or any of the same successes. So the inconsistency was something that stood out. So with a hired consultant who is here but not in the room right now, he came up with a platform and decided these are the issues. We have a change in use process that is mostly stalled around the state with very little movement happening. We have issues with some groups not being able to get a MOU to do trail work and things like that. And how to address those problems was one of Bill's big contributions to our success, was coming up with a platform and a program of advocacy with certain pillars that we work on. So working on the change in use process, working on improving land manager relationships, and each one had its own committee formed from members of the advisory council with some members of the board of directors as well. So by leveraging our council and the board and the expertise that was shared amongst all of our members, we really brought this program together, and it's really having some positive impact. We have a much better relationship now with the leadership at state parks in general, and those conversations we're hoping will lead to successes down the road.
And successes for the member community,
Yeah.
right? Like this is kind of back to that point again. This is really about, this coalition's work is really about trying to alleviate some of the barriers that is happening on the local ground, and to do so in a constructive and cooperative way. I think the thing I'll add to this work with the California State Parks, it was intended from the beginning to be a replicable model, replicable for us as a way to engage land managers elsewhere in the state. We made the first push with California State Parks in part because I think 87 89% of our member organizations had dealings with them. So it was an express priority. Like, we need some help with this agency. And then that said, like, the work that's been done, the time that's been invested thus far, we're applying those same frameworks to our next land manager engagement, which will be the U.S. Forest Service, and then rinse and repeat, so on and so on. It's not meant to be a formula by any means. It's not meant to be prescriptive, but the process of doing research and discovery, engagement with our member community, understanding the issues, and formulating a work plan that is shared and with shared priorities is a way for us to like continue to be building momentum and cooperation there within the coalition.
But what's allowed us to get to this point is having the partnerships that allowed us to do some fundraising, partnerships within the industry. Do you want to talk about some of those that we've got?
Sure, yeah. As a young organization, we started developing relationships with those that we met on our journey, and some of those partners that became partners through those conversations were Sierra Nevada has been generous. You know, our individual clubs probably know that if you hit them up, they'll provide the beers for your trail work events. They're very generous about that. But in this case, they've actually stepped up with cash, and they've donated directly to the organization. And you might have even seen that they partnered up with Paul Components and Oddity Bikes, and there's a really fascinating one-of-a-kind bike right now that Sierra decided they've done this bike before and benefited other orgs, and in this case they're benefiting CAMTB, and that bike's about to close. And what are we up to on fundraising on that?
Well, it's going to close in 48 hours, but
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that public information?
It's it is public information, but we'll
Get to that later.
Yeah.
All right. So Sierra Nevada has been generous. Bosch as well, and Bosch, as you know, is one of the leading motor manufacturers for e-bikes. We've not only we're seeing some of their direct support, but we've actually been out on rides with one of their area representatives and getting to have a conversation and a real relationship with somebody. You know, he's educating us on what these things do, and we're educating him on what are the challenges with the arrival of the e-bike up at the trailhead.
I think that's true. This industry relationship, like connecting industry to the advocacy component, I think some of our organizations at the local level are very good at it and have the capacity and sort of ability to engage those partners, and some have struggled. And I think that's one thing that we're thinking about is how do we, as a coalition, as this like collective voice, how do we actively engage and involve industry in advocacy? Support certainly with dollars is important, but also like getting their leadership involved in this and helping them to understand the issues and the challenges that these organizations are facing. Can you talk also about some of our nonprofit partners and some of those relationships? You know, Outdoor Alliance has been a great partner for us.
Let me just finish the list because it's really short.
Okay.
There's some important partners though. I just wanted to mention E13, Gins Eyewear. Gins makes glasses, but they also make cool cases for glasses. The CASE program goes on to fund nonprofits. Canyon Bikes just did something really special for us, and Specialized has just now stepped up the plate to do something special for us. So that's a nice list, and we're going to grow that list, and hopefully next year tell you about maybe 10 times that amount of support. Go ahead.
But we've had the industry partners, but we've also had a lot of support and cooperation from other nonprofits. So of course IMBA was one of the big ones that we engaged with early on, and when they heard that we were planning to put together a statewide organization, they were 100% supportive and behind us. We have also had support from other groups. Outdoor Alliance are a fantastic group who work on conservation efforts with through a recreation lens. And I was asked to join Outdoor Alliance California Policy Shop in early 2020, and since that time I've been engaged with that group, and we've done some really good work as far as engaging with elected officials and doing calls for support for legislation and things like that. We also have Recreate Responsibly, another coalition that formed in 2020 that had a presentation earlier, and being involved in that group was also really a forum in which we could share information across the state. Because the Recreate Responsibly California Coalition in the early days had anywhere from 50 to 100 participants on the call, all land managers, destination marketing organizations, and non-profits from around the state. So these types of efforts, when we come into it with wearing a California hat rather than my local Los Angeles hat, it's given us a little more reach and a little more capacity. Another one is the California Outdoor Recreation Partnership, who have been leading the Hike the Hill, the Sacramento Summit, when we go in and call or meet with elected officials and promote conservation and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and other aspects of recreation that we think elected officials need to understand better so that they can better support it when it comes to funding these types of efforts. Another one's Together Bay Area, which is a coalition of organizations from around the San Francisco Bay Area, and we're a member of that organization. We're also participating in the Sustainable Outdoor Recreation Collaborative from Region 5 of the Forest Service. So these partnerships have also been key. And I should also point out that we had early on reached out to other statewide organizations like Evergreen Mountain Bike Alliance in Washington State, and same thing. All of those organizations were very supportive and very willing to share documents and share examples of how they run things, and really helped us define what we wanted to do.
Well, before we move on into this, the third phase on this impact line, is there a win or a challenge or something that's emerging from you from this from the second year, from 2021, that really sticks out in your mind as a sort of a critical thing that emerged? Is any What would be from, like, if you were talking with your family, or talking with your colleagues, what would you point back to in 2021 as really a crux component of the coalition?
A lot of it was funding, getting enough funding to hire Michael, for example, because once we were able to hire Michael, that really turned things around. Is we had some growing pains. We did have an executive director before Michael, who started this out, but his expertise was in media, and though his heart was in the right place, he really didn't have the connections and the organizational skills that Michael has brought to us and been really effective. So getting that funding model to be able to hire Michael was a huge step, because once Michael came on board, that's when we really got our stuff together, and his vision for our development and organization is what really has gelled us into these different programs and things like that.
You made me blush,
Well, it's true.
I'll cut him some slack and say that take the attention off him just for a second.
Thank you.
Another win was in 21, the 1 year mark of our organizations came up, and 100% of the organizations renewed.
Yeah,
So that's a a win.
And in 2022.
Well, he asked about 21. But I will platform off of Steve and just say there's no bigger win than scoring Michael. And I just want to share a quick little story, because Michael likes to share this story, and it is special. Michael came to us. We had our board put out a job opening through some nonprofit channels. He discovered it, came to us with an application, and Jake and I and Matthew here got to take Michael on a writing interview. And we got to go, we're going to see if he can write. So we took him out to Tamarancho, and he slayed it, no problem. Okay, he can ride. But then we sat down and we did the drink a beer interview. It wasn't about to see if he could drink a beer. It was just we happened to meet at the local cafe, right? But it was the most unique interview I've been involved with, and I think Michael. But he presented himself as this just completely articulate and professional person. But I don't know if you've all could tell by now, with the kind, gentle soul. And the somehow I can't fluster the guy. I can't. He doesn't get flustered, and I was just like, that's not my strength. So, like, that's the win of 21 right there.
Thank you, man. Well, I want to shift gears, and we've got about probably 5 to 7 minutes left here. I want to make sure we get through those last couple pieces before we open it up for some questions. But I want to talk about this, the future state, the impact. You know, us working up until now, we've had wins along the way, certainly, and I think as an organization, reflecting back on the work that's been done and the efforts that have been made by our member organizations and such, certainly wins. But I feel like when I think of impact, I think of the big swings, the really being able to influence and affect and track legislation, really to be able to provide service and support to our member community, to be a place for those organizations to transfer information. I want to talk about the potential for this, because the people that are participating in it, I've heard them talking about what it might be or what it could become, but I want to hear from you guys. What is, from your perspective, what do you think the coalition itself has the potential to be or to become?
Well, one thing we haven't mentioned is that we are a C4. We're a 501c4, which means, and we did that on purpose early on because we realized that there was no 501c4 actively working on mountain biking issues. And a lot of the organizations that we see getting all the headlines and getting some really good action around the country are 501c4s because they're able to do the type of lobbying in Sacramento and Washington DC that really moves the needle. So I see that as one of our biggest strengths here, is to be able to look at legislation and leverage our 30,000 mountain bikers that we have access to build support for any piece of legislation. And right now is AB 1789 is one that we're putting all of our weight behind, that brings California state funds to natural surface trails. So those influencing legislation and elections is very high on the potential for positive outcomes for us.
I'd like to emphasize the grassroots side of it.
Yeah.
You know, we've got a couple new organizations that just are forming, that literally just from concept to here's a board of directors, yes, we want to join CAMTB. And that's really cool, and we can take our collective toolkit and our wisdom amongst our institutional wisdom amongst the board and member organizations and apply it. And we get those new people on Slack, they're already going to have a toolkit in front of them.
Yeah.
They can just start going back and reading channels and like, how do you do this? How do you do that? Who do you go for directors and officers insurance? Got any recommendations? Yes, we got a recommendation right here.
Yeah.
And just those basic things. How are we going to meet our land managers? How are we going to grow our club? Oh, well, have a meeting, go for a ride, be social, make it fun. We're going to help those organizations build and be successful.
Yeah.
That wasn't around when I was back when I was trying to help A4B get going. We didn't have an entity that could help.
Yeah, I'd really love to see that, and there's a hunger there. I see it amongst the member community and the willingness to do it, and I really challenge this coalition to embody that, to bring that to life.
And what's made that possible and what's made it more powerful is the knowledge repository that our Slack channels have become.
Yeah.
For example, we have a group who's looking at building their first bike park. So we have now a repository of sample agreements from different bike park projects around the state. And we have a repository of sample MOUs with land managers for doing trail work. So a new organisation now can come to CMTB, and some have, as brand new organisations have come to us, and they've been able to quick start their organisation based on having access to a bunch of this information through CMTB.
All right, so let's wrap it up in the with this last question, and this is really a food for thought piece. I want to hear from both you and Steve, you and Vernon there, if someone was considering launching a coalition, if they wanted themselves to build their own platform for advocacy, what are 2 or 3 or even one thing that you would say is that you recommend them to do and consider in their effort to do so?
Well, one thing that we have done, and it's going on 4 years now that we're doing this, is meeting every week. We have a board meeting every Wednesday, and we have done every week, 50 weeks a year at least, because we miss Christmas and we miss Sea Otter. But every week for 50 times a year we've had meetings. So that
regular engagement.
Yeah, and over and above monthly meetings, I think it's really helped us stay on track, because having a month, there's enough time for you to okay, I'll do that later in the month before the next meeting, and then the next meeting gets here and 3 weeks have gone by. And
instead of having enough time to get the work, it's
right.
enough time to
and
not.
When you have a 1 week interval, it really keeps everyone in the game all the time. So that's been key, and I think not depending on email has been very helpful too.
So it sounds like the tech and communication platform is like getting that dialed in and is imperative. How about for you, Vernon?
Well, I kind of said it earlier, have events, and I mean, we're coming out of COVID, so, it has been a struggle to do, although outdoor activities we were still encouraged to do.
Yeah.
So we were able to navigate it in terms of our trail work events, and now we're, hopefully we're getting, putting it behind. But I would say have an event. It doesn't, trail work is great. Social ride is great. I don't recommend producing races because the insurance for that is expensive. But I mean, fun rides, meeting at a local cafe or pub, and just being human and getting issues on the table and talking and sharing so that you can come up with, some solutions and then start putting a game plan towards those solutions. But also, there was somehow we overlooked one item, and I want to just insert it right here.
Yeah, go for it.
I think that in that early phase, or in that recommendation of any organization needs to be thinking about their diversity, equity, inclusion initiative. This is something that we are really getting active on at Access for Bikes, and we are starting to make some inroads with some less privileged communities and some people of color, and it's not easy. There can be a trust issue with that work, and what it's taken is us joining their rides, not relying on them joining our meeting or them joining our rides, but us joining their community. And it's a gesture of goodwill, and it's one of those icebreakers. And through doing that, we started this a little less than a year ago, but by doing that, we've got some of those people now attending meetings, and a bunch of them signed up for our event next weekend, Ales and Trails. So there's a goal here, not just for our club at Access for Bikes for Diversity. There's a goal here at CAMTB, and that goal is giving less privileged people and people of color a voice, because it shouldn't be us speaking, for everyone all the time. We need to provide a voice and education and tools and holding up a platform for others. And I think that work should start early in an organization's work, because it's not easy. and it takes some very deliberate moves.
Right. Yeah, I think a really important, essential culture component, and I think my takeaway would be actually some work that's been happening recently with some of our member organizations, which is establishing a code of conduct, a code of ethics that we share, sort of operating principles that we are going to hold ourselves to. And I think that's, as an organization grows, and it got big fast, right? And it's hard. I think having that as a cornerstone of our engagement will be an important component to like landing the culture of this organization, making it an inclusive and a welcoming environment. Well, we're last couple minutes here. We will Steve and Vernon, thank you for sitting with me here and sharing some of your stories and sharing some of your perspective. We'll open it up if there's any couple of questions, and if not, we'll wrap and get you guys on the way. Sure.
I was curious about on the e-bike policy. You mentioned class 1, it's great. And then the second piece to that is, as long as there's an engagement or cooperation with, I think it was like land managers, was that?
Yeah.
What types of like, can you talk a little bit more what that looks like?
Steve, you want to sure.
Well, so yeah, I'll give you a real life story.
Great.
The California State Parks has 3 months ago came out with an e-bike policy, and surprising to all of us here, because we thought we were at the table. Well, we feel like the table was kind of pulled out, or the rug, however you want to say that, because the policy turned out to be e-bikes were illegal in all state parks other than OHV areas or where state parks already had an e-bike policy. They were now illegal. So in Marin, we have a very popular mountain bike state park, China Camp State Park, where bikes are, really good bike trails and good hiker-biker cooperation, interface, good relations. And now all of a sudden, 3 months ago when that law flipped, the park, all parks are supposed to go out and put no e-bike signs out on every single trip, unless they have a policy already in place. So there was a provision was made to allow them with a director's order, and the superintendent's order provided there was a study component to the order. So we worked with our state park, Access for Bikes, worked with our Bay Area District State Park with our superintendent, and helped get an order drafted to allow for mountain biking in China Camp State Park. And order's been signed, and it's about to be posted on the website. So and we are funding the study. We're doing more of a social study of the bikes and how people interact. Is it an impact? Is e-bikes? Do they even know the difference? There's a 20-question social impact study that's also going to go along with this. We've had to hire a marketing firm, and we're spending money of our own, because we're trying to navigate this. We realize at least 40% of our members are now on e-bikes, and to ignore that is not sustainable for our organization. So we're diving in. That is an example of a bike entity, bike organization, advocacy organization working with a land manager. The same would be true if currently it's also not allowed, currently by policy, they're not allowed on our watershed. And the watershed is 22,000 acres. It's the largest resource, open to recreation. It's the largest resource in Marin County. And we believe that there needs to be a conversation similar to what I described at the state parks. We believe that we need to be engaged in a conversation. And that is going to be happening because they're going to be reviewing the recreation plan, and stakeholders are going to have a seat at the table, and so that conversation will be happening. What that is, the opposite of that would be a an agency making a blanket policy without engaging the bike community, and just, and because that would be divisive, really, and it would be unreasonable or unrealistic, given that there's so many out there already. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, it can lead into many more, but I don't wanna take up other time.
Well, let's do this, just because we're bumping up against the wrap up here. I think Vernon and Steve are gonna hang out, and welcome to kind of continue the conversation here. I think it'd be interesting to talk about, with that e-bike policy, just to wrap it up, it's like we kept the local preference is the priority. And that involves, instead of it just being on the lane manager, it's lane manager plus the local trail organization.
Yeah.
It's creating an opportunity for them to be in communication and coordination, and not issuing it from a state level. So saying generally we're in favor of it, but ultimately it's on a per location basis for class 1.
Yeah, engage.
Yeah. Thanks everybody. Good to see you all.
You have your session evaluations, just bring them on up here and set them upside down right here on the table there first.